Hey everyone. We are just about to get started with our presentation on file management best practices. I just want to check in. I see I've got a number of you on. Can somebody get into the comments and let me know that they can hear what's going on? We want to make sure that we deliver all of the information today. So I'm Monica Brain. I'm project specialist with Amarant Critical Infrastructure. Oh, Christine, thank you so much. Great. Um, and Amarant Critical Infrastructure is a consulting company inside of Amarant, the only native-owned insurance company in the United States. And for critical infrastructure, we help tribes with project management, um, grant writing. We've been mostly in the broadband era, but we are expanding out into other areas. And if you're interested, you can give us a call at Amarant and we can talk to you more about what Amarant Critical Infrastructure can do for your tribe, for your projects. But today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Nicholas Standard. He is a help desk support at Amarant, and he is going to talk to you about file management best practices. And if you have a desktop like mine, which has 35 files on it right now, I think that this is a really key information to learn how to just put things where they need to go, basically. Fun fact about Nick, he has a parrot that he got when he was a teenager, and it's pretty cute. So, Nick, you're not going to talk about your parrot, but we will talk about best practices in file management. Take it away.
Thanks, Monica. As Monica said, my name is Nick Standard, and I'm help desk here at Amarant. So today we're going to be talking about file management best practices. Now, I'm sure at least somebody here has a document filled desktop, but what we're aiming to do today is to get that desktop decluttered and get everything organized so that we can find anything you need. So let's see. What is file management? So basically, at a core, it's turning that cluster of files there into a nice, neat, organized file system. Now, really, it can be as simple as just putting a couple of files on or folders on your desktop, or it could be as complex as having an entire structure for your entire company. But most of these ideas will stay the same regardless of how big or how small your file structure is. So the goal of file management is concise, accurate, and easily obtainable information. In 5, 10, or even 15 years down the road, anyone can open it and find exactly what they need. And so definitely one of the main things that's ultra visible is it eliminates clutter. And a nice thing about file management is it introduces accountability into the changes of the file. So if somebody's changing something or there was a change made that needs to be reverted, you can see exactly who, what, where, and when this change took place. And that can make the difference between having the information you need and not. A lot of file management systems also have security. So you can also secure any sensitive info and keep it out of the reach of people that don't need to be reading it. And implementing all this stuff together can save you time, effort, and money. So some of the core tenets of great file management is you always want to have a backup. Need a backup, backup, backup. That is the number one goal of a good file management system. So say, you think something's not needed, so you delete something. 3 years down the road, somebody asks for some very specific information, and where is it? Where did it go? It's in your backup. So always ensure that the files are easily accessible. That's another huge goal of file management. You don't want anything spread across 3 or 4, even 5 different folders. You always want to keep everything as closely knit together as you possibly can. So to do that, you can implement a hierarchical structure. So say you have the main folder being either your department or a year, and then in the folder underneath that, you can have the type of project or a subfolder with maybe like the group that it is. So there's really a lot of different options that you can go with here, but they all follow the same structure and try to keep everything as tightly knit as possible. And to do that, you can make easy to follow storage rules. That way everybody's on the same page and nobody's doing 3 different types of things in the same area. So what makes a good hierarchy? So you want to start with a clear main folder for your project. So this could be, again, the year of the project. It could be the name of the project. It could be the name of the department, or it could even be, the project itself. So under that, you want to subdivide into categories based on file types or tasks. So say, in your main project folder, you have a folder for presentations or a folder for email correspondence, or maybe even a folder for, the specific team or department that is working on that. Another thing is to use consistent naming conventions so everybody can understand exactly quickly what this file is for and where they should go looking. So another good thing to do is include dates or version numbers in the folder names. That way everybody knows exactly what they're going to be looking for and the time frame from when that document was created. Another main thing to do is regularly review and update the folder structure. You want to make sure that everybody's following all the rules and that everything looks correct. You can't just kind of set it and forget it, because then it can kind of, like a house that doesn't get cleaned regularly, it gets dusty. So we talked about folder naming and folder structure, now about file names. So you always want to use a descriptive name that reflects the contents of the file. So for example, if you have a folder full of receipts, you can make a file name that starts with, the place where you purchased the receipt or purchased the product for the receipt, the date that you purchased it, and then the amount that was purchased. That way, you can see exactly what you're looking for without even having to open up the file. So again, you can use year, month, date. If you're going to be sorting through files, say, you need to find all receipts from 2024, you can sort it and then boom, there you go. All the receipts for 2024 are there. If you're looking more for month or day, then you can kind of change the format a little bit so that you can sort easier. So another thing you can do is use a version number. So this kind of gets a little bit iffy sometimes. You don't want to end up with files that say, final _1 _this one use this. You want to try to keep the version number as short as possible. That way that you don't get it to kind of expand. So maybe like version number you can use is possibly in the receipt example, the cost. So the cost could be a version number. So it doesn't actually have to be a specific type of value. It can just be a single identifier that's relevant to the file that you can use to make sure that the document that you're looking at is the one you want. One thing to do is avoid special characters in your files. They can break systems and lead to compatibility issues. A special character would be like an and symbol, an at, a pound, percentage, that kind of thing. Always try to keep it to alphanumeric. And again, keep the file names concise. So you don't want to end up with something that's project _final _this one _final one. You want to keep it so that you know exactly what you're looking at without even opening the file. So to create these rules, generally the best practice would be to create a standard operating procedure document. This could be as simple as, a single page document saying how the folder works, or it could be a multi-page thing with different departments following different procedures for how it works best for them. So the best way to work on this is to work on it as a team so that everybody's requirements are met, while also having the clear understanding about what everybody needs to do for their folder structure. And then periodically have an audit against the SOP to make sure that everybody is following the folder structure as agreed, and make sure that things are in their correct spots. So we talked about folder structures, but where do we put the folder structure? So this would be a document management system. So a document management system, or DMS, is a tool designed to store, manage, and track electronic documents and images. It could be scans, it could be your documents. Pretty much anything that you can store on a file can be stored in a DMS. So the key features of a DMS include the version control. This would allow you to go back and see the different changes that were made to the file. Access control, of course, which allows you to figure out who's been accessing the file and who should be accessing the file. Searchability is another main concern of a document management system. Most of them allow you to search from within a document, but some only allow you to search the name of the document. And a really cool thing that a lot of document management systems are doing nowadays, they allow collaboration, or people being able to work on the same file at the same time without it interfering with each other. So there are different types of document management systems, and they can be simple or complicated depending on what features you need and how you're working with your files. So the most simple of them is the Windows File Explorer. You know, the little folder icon on your computer, that's a document management system. Going up from there, we have cloud-based ones, which are Dropbox, Google Drive, and Microsoft SharePoint. Now, they all accomplish basically the same thing, but they do so in slightly different ways. And it really depends on the type of project you're using, which one you'd want to use. So for simple stuff, Windows File Explorer may just be fine for you. But the most advanced one here would be Microsoft SharePoint or Google Drive, and they have a lot of the really nice features with the security as well as version control that may be of interest. So most of the new ones are cloud-based, and here are some advantages of a cloud-based document management system. So anywhere you have internet, you have access to your documents. You can do the collaboration with your teammates in real time. It allows you to see their changes as they're changing them. It offers automatic backup and disaster recovery. So say, you're building floods and your servers go down. Well, I mean, Google and Microsoft servers probably didn't flood. So there you go. It also scales to meet the size and needs of the organization. So it could be as simple as, one gigabyte a month from Google, or you could have multiple terabytes of data stored up there. And it doesn't require the purchase of more and more stuff on site. It's simply just scaling to your organization. And a lot of these security systems have advanced encryption and access controls on them. So you always get the best. I know people have some issues with putting stuff in the cloud sometimes, and those concerns are valid. But the majority of the hacks that happen are from people leaving a door open and not the actual provider itself. So the provider itself, you're getting world-class and industry-class security when it comes to your files, but you always want to make sure that your accounts are secured because that's where the leak comes from. So there are some traps to avoid when making a file management system or choosing a file management system and making some folder management structures. So try to keep everything concise. You don't want it to be too descriptive. I've seen some where people have the entire name of an email or the entire subject of an email as the name, and it could get really long. A lot of things don't like that being that long, and it makes it a lot harder to see exactly what you're looking at when you have an entire sentence as your folder name. Another thing is to try to keep the level of subfolders to a minimum. You want to group by the lowest common denominator on a file or group of files and make a folder from there. But you don't want to try to get to the point where it's 2024, and then you have a month, then you have a day, and then you have a department, and then in that department you have another month, and it just gets out of control from there. You want to try to keep it as short as possible. So I have a little graphic here showing, the first level and then the second level. Try to keep it at least, 1 or 2 levels down after that. Otherwise, it just gets to be to the point where it's hard to find things. And so overcomplicating it can definitely lead to confusion. Don't use plain file names. So again, incorporate metadata such as the date or the version numbers in your files. It makes it easier to sort, makes it easier to track, and you're not just opening document after document trying to find the information that you need. And then the number one thing to avoid is don't neglect the user's input. Definitely talk to everyone who's going to be using this and find out what their needs are and make sure that when you're building this, that everybody has what they need to be efficient. That's about it. Any questions?
Oh, that was great, Nick. Thank you so much for that information. We will let folks, if you have questions about file management, go ahead and put them in the chat. And I have a few questions of my own to get us started. I really related to what you were saying about the not making it too long. I've definitely had, as a grant writer, I've had files titled, please God, let this be the final version, which is just not helpful for everybody else on the team. One tip that I heard was um, that instead of version 6, version 7, if you go up to a certain version and then you start again. So one group I worked with, they would call something dead at the end of it, and you would know there was, if you saw dead, that not to go and work on that, but you still had a version of that. What do you think about that approach?
That's a pretty good way to do it. Really, anything that would signify on the file that it's not an active, they call it a live document, where the document that's live is the one that's being worked on. Really, anything that can signify a document being either live or an archive document would be the best way to go with that. And as long as everybody agrees on it, I mean, having that would be perfectly fine.
How do you set up a good system for saving to the right place from the beginning? You know, I always put things on the desktop first, and then I move it later when I have time to the correct folders. And I just know that's not the right path. And it's kind of creating more work for myself.
So Windows and Mac, they both have the ability to have favorite folders or quick access folders, and those folders would appear on the left-hand side of your computer. Whenever you're saving anything, when you choose on the left-hand side where you should save it to, you can pin specific files and folders to that area. So if you have an area that you're working on that week, or even something that you're working on that day, feel free to pin the file that you're working from right there, so that instead of being tempted to click the desktop icon that's always right there, you
Yeah.
have the folder that you're working with right there at the same place.
Stand on saving everything on your desktop, even if it's in nice folder, you know, different folders on the desktop.
So the folders that you put them in, really, if you put them on the desktop, then that means that you have access to them, but not everybody does. So if you are okay with saving things in a location that are only going to be for you, the desktop is a perfectly fine place to put it. But if you want to save something where other people can access it, consider putting it in a more visible area than on your desktop.
I agree. I agree. We've got Cheryl. She said, you said that cloud providers have great security and it is leaving an account open that causes the hack. What does that mean? What does that look like?
So what I mean by that is, so when you're uploading a file to Google or Microsoft, you have all the power of all their engineers to keep not only their system safe, but your files inside their system safe. But security is only as good as its weakest link. And a lot of these providers will allow you to give you a lot of control over who accesses your files and where. So a lot of the time, what happens is somebody overshares a file. So something that's not meant for general consumption gets shared. Say the link is anyone with the link can open it versus only these people. That would make it so if that link accidentally got stuck to an email chain somewhere, anyone that saw the link could open the file, and there you have information leaking out. So you definitely want to make sure that you use the correct type of sharing options when you do share stuff on the cloud, so that only the people that you specifically add can view it if it's a sensitive item. Another way that happens is if somebody has a weak password, or if they don't have two-factor authentication on their account. If Microsoft will let you in if your settings are configured to let people in, and if the settings are insecure, then you'll be able to get hacked. We've seen a lot of things happen recently with phishing attacks. They'll send an email that looks like a document that you should review. And when you sign in, you're not actually signing in with Microsoft, you're signing in with a hacker's computer. And now they have your information to get into your documents. So that's another thing to look out for when using cloud provider services.
Yeah, the urge to just delete everything and call everyone on the phone is strong, but I know this is not going to work in terms of getting our work done in an efficient and quick way. Um, Okay, we've got a great question from Lorita. I'm going to put it up and I'll read it as well. So the more files you add, the more documents you save and the less storage space you have, correct? So how long should files be kept and when should they be deleted? Or storage space doesn't matter in the cloud?
So that is a good question.
Yeah,
So
right?
with keeping documents, there's really no hard or fast rule for how long you should keep the document. I mean, there are certain legal considerations to take into place when it comes to different documents. But generally, I can say that when you're absolutely done with the document, keep it for about 3 or 4 years. And then after that, it can be recycled. So you will lose space the more documents you have, but unless the documents are very large documents, they don't take up too much space anymore. It used to be in the old days that space was at a very big premium and you only had a very finite amount of space to put stuff. But nowadays, storage is so cheap that computers themselves have enough to store basically an entire organization's worth of files, and even more so on the cloud. So it has to do with the economy of scale. The larger servers that these providers operate, the cheaper the data storage on them becomes. So it's not, space isn't really as large of an issue as it used to be, but that is a good question to answer for how long you should keep the files. So generally, I would say 3 or 4 years after the project is completed or they're no longer needed, unless there is a legal storage requirement for them, then keep them about 10 years just in case.
Yeah, especially if your company has a policy about how long to keep files, then definitely follow that as well. And if you don't, maybe it's a good idea to write a standard operating procedure on how long to keep files. I find that I spend not a lot of time, but sometimes searching because I've either forgotten the name of the file or where I put it, things like that. Do you have any tips or tricks for searching for something that you forgot what you titled it or where you put it?
Yeah, definitely. So with searching for files, most cloud providers do something called indexing, which
Mm,
allows you to search not only for the folder name or the file name, but the actual content of the document. So if you know something that's in the document, you can search directly from the contents of the document to find what you need. So say you're writing a grant or working on a proposal, and you know that you're working with these specific items in that proposal, you can search on those items and it'll show you every document that has those items in it.
that's great. We got another question in the chat. This one is from Colleen. What is too many when it comes to subfolders?
Generally, I'd say about five subfolders deep, and you're starting to get into spaghetti territory. You want to keep everything as flat as possible. So flat is in, main folder, subfolders, and then maybe a couple of subfolders underneath that and wide. So you have different categories versus main folder, folder underneath that, another folder, another folder, another folder. So when it starts to feel like you're digging to find something, then that would be too many subfolders.
Mm. You know, speaking of that, what do you do if people in your team disagree on like the naming conventions or they don't follow the rules in terms of how to label things? Do you have any suggestions for that?
So that sounds like it means that the document management structure that is being worked on doesn't work for everybody. So that's definitely something where, as a team, you need to collaborate and come up with a better solution to meet everybody's needs. Because, yeah,
Yeah, I find that too. If folks are just outright not following the rules I have made for them, then it's time to have like an honest conversation about why isn't this working? And let's find a better way to make this work for everybody. Okay, Nick, I
exactly.
got one. I have one more question. If anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, where do you stand on the safety of certain platforms like Dropbox versus Microsoft?
So this again, the security of those and the safety of those, it's related to the weakest link in your organization or the organization that hosts your files. I'm not going to say that one is 100% secure, but it's definitely good to look at the track record of the major providers, and most of the major providers have a really good track record as far as security goes. If you're concerned about a massive amount of personal data leaking out, you can also encrypt the file before you upload them, so that even if the cloud provider gets hacked, your files are still encrypted by your encryption that only you know. It's relatively easy to do that. There are multiple free tools that you can use to encrypt data before you put them on the cloud, and that would be a way to ensure 100% that your files, even if they leak, won't have the data taken out of them. But as it stands, the track record of Microsoft and Dropbox, there was a Dropbox hack back in 2012, but they've definitely gotten their security a lot better. But it's a legitimate concern, but it's not the provider getting hacked isn't as big of a concern as somebody who is accessing the files getting hacked. That's where the major concern for files on the cloud are.
That good old Post-it note with your 1, 2, 3, 4 password on it on your desk is probably the bigger thing to be worrying about than whether or not, Microsoft's getting hacked.
Exactly.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. I will send an email out after this to everybody with your slides so folks can take a look at it. And join us next week. We are going to have a webinar on how to have effective meetings. I am putting the link to that in the chat right now. You can also go to Amarin.com to and look for our webinar page, and there'll be more information about that as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Monica.